It's Margaret. I'm from ModVegan. It's a YouTube channel where we talk about modern vegan living. And today I'm going to be interviewing Wendy from the Nomadic Vegan. Wendy is a world traveler. I'm going to just guest her in right now. We're going to be talking about vegan travel and traveling as a vegan, which is something that is not always easy for people, especially if they're new to veganism. So I'm just going to guest Wendy in right now, and we're going to just be chatting about what it's like to travel as a vegan and how that is. And it looks like Wendy's just joining us now. I hope everyone's having a good morning. I haven't done you now for a very long time, so we'll see how this goes. I have not had that much time to watch things on you now. I hope everyone else has had more time. I think Wendy's just joining us now. Let's see how this goes.
So hello, Margaret. Nice to see you.
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you too. How is everything in Portugal?
Nice and sunny and bright blue skies. So yeah, it's gorgeous. My husband and I have this thing that we do every Friday. We call it Lisbon Friday, and so we go out and explore the city and go see some kind of site or museum or something that we've never visited before. So we did that yesterday, because otherwise I tend to just like stay at home all the time and work, and not really enjoy this beautiful city. So yeah, yesterday we went to a place called the Convento do Carmo, which is an old church. It was built in the 14th century, and then it was destroyed in this huge earthquake, which destroyed much of Lisbon in the 1755. And now it's partially restored, but the roof has not been replaced, so it's just like open air church with these kind of vaulted things coming up into the sky, and it's a really evocative sight. So yeah, I saw that yesterday, which was great.
Oh, that's lovely. It's amazing how many beautiful things there are to see all over the world. And I'm sure also, like living in a city like Lisbon, you probably do still get the chance. I know you've lived there for quite a while now, I believe, but you still are
Yeah,
getting to see new things all the time.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We've been based here for a little over a year now. But then, based here, we're probably here maybe half of the year, and then we're traveling the other half of the year. And like I said, I tend to take the opportunity when we are here to get a lot of work done. So yeah, I haven't really seen as much of the city as I thought I would have by this point. So I'm glad that we started this Lisbon Friday thing, because it's really, making sure that I get out there and experience it, which is great.
That's such a great idea. And yeah, it's something I think all of us wish we could get out and travel more. You were saying you've been able to travel like about 6 months of the year. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing.
I was just going to say hi to Tommy. That's nice when people are watching. But yes,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So 6 months of the year, and you've been to about 109 countries, which is
Yep.
a lot of places. So you 102, 109, something like that. How many places have you gone?
Yeah, I think the total count now is 109. So yeah, that's exactly right.
That's amazing. So out of the 109, what have been some of the best places you've gone? And have you gone to all those places as a vegan, or were you vegan for some of that time? Like, have you gone? You've gone a lot of places though as a vegan, yes?
Yeah, quite a few. Definitely not all of them. Oh, Tommy's got applause. Thank you, Tommy. I think I've been to maybe 24 or 25 countries as a vegan so far. So yeah, my passion for travel came first, and then my passion for veganism came much later, actually. So I've started traveling. I left the States. I grew up in the US, and then I left there in 1999. So it's been 19 years now. I didn't realize that was going to be a permanent move at the time, but it ended up being, yeah, a permanent thing. And I've lived and traveled in lots of places since then. And so yeah, in total, it's been 109 countries. But then I didn't become vegan until 2014. So it's been about 3.5 years. And at the time, I was kind of starting to transition towards a more plant-based vegan lifestyle. but I didn't think that I would ever become fully vegan because I thought it was going to ruin travel. And that was honestly one of the biggest fears that was holding me back from being fully vegan, was that I didn't know if it would even be possible to find vegan food in some of the places where I had already been, and then also some of the places where I still wanted to go. And travel was such a huge part of my life that, you know, that was really daunting for me. But once I finally gave it a try, which I actually did kind of a trial run. So this was in the autumn of 2014, and I had a trip booked already to Greece. My husband and I were going to Greece for 3 weeks. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to see if I can stay vegan for the 3 weeks that I'm in Greece, and we'll see how that goes. And I was astonished to find when I was there that, you know, there was a huge abundance of vegan foods available to me. And as it turned out, Greece it was kind of lucky that that was the place that I used for my challenge. It is actually a very vegan-friendly cuisine, the traditional Greek cuisine, even though that's something that a lot of people don't realize. So if I had gone to France, say, then it might have been a little more challenging. But, you know, it gave me the boost of confidence that I needed to say, oh, okay, this is actually not only possible, but, you know, it's actually really fun. And I honestly enjoy my travels even more now as a vegan than I did before. And so I never looked back after that trip to Greece. And so the day that my plane landed in Athens, the first day of that trip, that is the day that I count as my veganiversary, as the day that I became fully vegan. So that was September 10th, 2014.
What month in 2014? Sorry,
September 10th.
Okay, yeah, that's just about a year before I went vegan as well. That's very cool. And
Awesome.
such a good suggestion, I think, for people who are planning on going vegan or have just started. I think you're absolutely right. That is the most, at least it was for me, it was the most daunting thing, like the idea of traveling as a vegan. For a lot of people, it's their family. So I guess that's the first time we kind of ever travel outside of our comfort zone, is usually when we go to visit family or to a restaurant for the first time. But those are kind of the biggest challenges that I think everyone faces. And such a good idea to just go with an open mind and see what you can find, but also good to be prepared. So what have you found since then that has really helped you to be more prepared when you go to a new country and things like that? Do you have any suggestions for people about how to find food, like especially when they're not used to it maybe? Like, what are some of your top suggestions that you have?
Absolutely, yeah. I do think that researching your destination ahead of time is really important, and your trip is going to run a lot more smoothly, which is something that we all do. We all plan and prepare and research before we go on a trip. You know, you plan out what hotel you're going to stay at and what kind of sites you want to see. Some do more research than others, but everyone does this. But, you know, you're not necessarily used to planning which restaurants you're going to eat at. Which is something that I do recommend. You know, you don't have to plan out every meal, but get an idea of what's available. Happy Cow is a great place to start. That's usually the first place that I check. So for those who aren't familiar with Happy Cow, it's a worldwide directory of vegan restaurants, vegetarian restaurants, and just vegan-friendly restaurants all over the world. And it's crowdsourced, so anyone can add to it. You can add to it if you're out traveling or even in your hometown and you discover a restaurant that is not listed in Happy Cow, then you can create that listing so that other people who are in that destination after you will be able to find that place. So it's really, really handy. And that's definitely probably the first kind of port of call that I go to when I'm doing research for a trip. But you know, it's not the last one. And so if you go to Happy Cow and you see, oh no, they don't have a single listing for my destination where I want to go, don't freak out about that either, because that doesn't mean that there isn't any vegan food there. There could even be vegan or vegetarian restaurants there that just aren't listed in Happy Cow, because like I said, it is crowdsourced, so it's dependent on the community to add to it. And generally the community is quite good about doing that. But if you're going to a more off the beaten path kind of destination where there just aren't that many people, any vegans who have been there ahead of you, then it's much less likely that you're going to find those listings already there. So yeah, I would say in that case, it's probably a good idea. Well, this is a good idea anyway, is to look not just at restaurants, but look at the cuisine as a whole, and start researching that cuisine and finding out what are the dishes that might be part of the traditional cuisine that's dishes that you're going to find on any typical restaurant menu, not just a vegetarian restaurant menu, that are actually going to be vegan or can very easily be veganized just by asking them to leave off the cheese or something like that.
That is such a good suggestion, and that's one of the things that I have found as well. Like all of the things you were saying, like certainly with Happy Cow, like you say, Happy Cow has a lot of ideas, and that's really exciting. But on the other hand, they don't always cover everything. I know I went to the U.S. recently, and the suggestions that they had for the place I was at were old, and so some of them weren't accurate. And I actually found some awesome restaurants that they hadn't even mentioned that they had vegan items there on the menu. So that's a really good suggestion. And also, like you're saying, finding out about the cuisine is really important. And for some of us, we're familiar with certain cuisines that might not be native to our own land. Like I know in the U.S., people are probably fairly familiar with what might be a vegetarian vegan option in, Mexican cuisine, for example.
Yeah.
And like for me, my husband's from Colombia, so I know what traditional foods there are likely to be vegan. And like you say, pretty much every nation has, and every cuisine, they have kind of these vegetarian basics that we never even think about. And when you think about just the basics of any cuisine, a lot of those are going to be vegan, probably even more than some of your traditional kind of are more, I don't know how to say, but the cuisine that you find in like Canada or in the US. And it is actually, I think in some ways, harder to eat vegan in Canada and the US than it is in Europe or in Latin America or Africa, all the places you've been. And I love that about your book. You wrote the book Veggie Planet, and I read that earlier this year and did a review of it for my channel, but I really liked that book because we all are familiar with certain cuisines, but unless you travel a lot, you may not know those basics for other cultures. And I love that you did that in that book. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose that format? And again, I think you kind of just mentioned it there a little bit, but I really liked that you talk about that because it just gives you kind of a little snippet of what, like just like how beans and rice might be something in Latin America that you're going to find that's going to usually be vegan. I love that you talk about that in other cuisines too. And what are some examples maybe of some cuisines that you found these vegetarian vegan basics that you didn't even expect to find?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your very kind words about my book, Veggie Planet, and for the wonderful review that you did. I really appreciate that. The reason that I took that approach with the book is I did want to show people that, you don't have to go into a vegetarian restaurant or vegan restaurant in order to find a delicious vegan meal, that it's possible to be vegan anywhere around the world. And in fact, the world as a whole is a lot more vegan friendly than we think. Because, as you said, I'd say most of the most popular, ethnic cuisines, and so I'm thinking there about Mexican and Chinese and Indian and Italian. Those are some of the cuisines that I talk about in Veggie Planet. There are 11 of them that I talk about in total in the book, so with 11 chapters for each one. And all of those are really largely plant-based, more so than the cuisine that I grew up with in the States and that, that you're probably familiar with in Canada as well, and also in the UK. All of the English-speaking countries, Australia as well, it's more of a mix over there, but it's a very meat and potatoes kind of cuisine, where we tend to think that a big slab of meat has to be the main component of the meal, and then you have some vegetable side dishes, but those are just the side dishes, and then the real, the real.
I don't know if you found this too, but I've found in other cuisines, you're less likely to have non-plant-based surprises than you are in like you say, traditional English speaking countries. Like in China, for example, rice always is just made with water basically because they add all of the seasoning later. So that you're less likely in some ways to even have animal products in some of those dishes than you are in the States. So I think that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
I get too hung up on trying to weed out all of these tiny, minute quantities of animal ingredients that might be hidden inside the food. Because I feel like, it's just not the best use of your time. And some ways it can kind of backfire, especially if you're eating with other people, if you're out dining with other people and they see you, grill waiter with 100 questions saying, what's in the bread and what kind of stock was used for this soup and you should ask questions. You shouldn't be afraid of letting people know what you want and what you need as a vegan. But when you're traveling or just eating out, but especially when you're traveling in a foreign country and probably don't speak the language, and mistakes are going to happen. And, I tend to not worry about those, like I said, those minute quantities so much. Although I do tell people what those ingredients are, what those possible hidden ingredients are that they might want to look out for. So I go through that in Veggie Planet as well. So for example, if you're in Thailand, then shrimp paste and fish sauce are going to be things that might sneak into a dish that would otherwise appear to be vegan. And, I give you the word for those in Thai so that you can ask about those. But yeah, in general, I try not to focus too much on that and to just, focus on if my food is to all appearances and as best as I can determine if it's a vegan dish, then I'm happy with that. I'm not going to, but they said it was vegetarian, but maybe there's still a tiny bit of shrimp paste, and how can I know for sure? Because, you can never know for sure about anything unless you've cooked it yourself. And so I do think that we need to let go just a little bit of that need to control everything and just do the best you can. And that's all that you can do.
I agree completely. And I think that's one of the things that that is so important to always keep in mind. We're always trying to do our best. It's not about being perfect. It's about making every day better and doing the best you can to make the world a better place. I
Absolutely.
saw an interview on Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine on their YouTube channel, the PCRM YouTube channel, and they were doing an interview with an Olympian, Megan Duhamel. She's a Canadian figure skater. I
know.
I thought that was very interesting, and I wondered if you could speak to that, because she was mentioning that, and I think you probably picked up on some of the same things that I did in that interview. She was talking about how in the Olympic Village, there was really no plant-based food to eat because she's a plant-based Olympian. She was saying that there was really no food in the Olympic Village in Pyeongchang. But again, probably if she'd been able to get out a little bit more, she might have been able to find things. But it sounded like she didn't have someone like you to prepare her. I was listening to the interview and thinking, darn, if only I'd known, I would have tweeted her your account way before the visit. And, any suggestions for that kind of thing? And maybe, like, especially because we are in the middle of the Olympics, like if someone was in South Korea, like what would they be able to find to eat? What are some traditional foods that you think in Asia would be really good things to explore?
Great. Yeah. I actually did not see that interview. The reason I reacted when you said that is because I'm a huge figure skating fan. And so I know of Megan Duhamel, and I know that she's a vegan. And so, yeah, I recognize the name. But yeah, I'd love to see that interview. I didn't know that they interviewed her on the PCRM YouTube channel, so that's really cool. And it's funny that you should say that about finding vegan food in the Olympic Village, because my husband actually works at a number of major sporting events around the world. So he is not in Pyeongchang, but he has worked at many Olympic Games in the past. So and he is vegan as well. So he went to Rio as a vegan. And he actually wrote a guest post, which I have up on my blog at theNomadicVegan.com, about eating vegan at the Olympics in Rio, because it is, as you were saying, you are kind of stuck inside this Olympic bubble, whether you're an athlete or a staff member. And, for the 2 weeks that you're at the games, you really don't have many opportunities to get out into the real world. So, you kind of have to just deal with whatever they have, whatever they offer you there at the canteens. But he managed to do quite well in Rio. I don't know how that compares to what the situation is there now in Pyeongchang, but he ate lots and lots of rice and beans.
Yeah. she was saying she pretty much subsisted on crackers most of the time. Like it was
Ugh.
great. She brought a few packages of food with her, which I guess that's important too, to be prepared, especially depending on how long you're traveling for. I find for myself it's always good to bring some food, just because I'm one of those people who does like to eat a little bit in my hotel room or wherever I'm staying, just because it doesn't get healthy. Even if you're eating plant-based, you don't want to be eating out for every single meal. So it is good to be prepared a
Yeah.
little bit that way, but also
Yeah.
to have some idea of the local cuisine, because it sounded like when she did get out of the village, she went and ordered pizza with no cheese, you know.
Right.
And it may have been
Yeah.
something about dining with as well that kind of contributed to that as well. But like you say, probably just, like the rice and beans thing, knowing those things is probably super helpful. Like I don't know what would be an equivalent in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
knowing.
Well, yeah, so rice is also going to be a major staple in most Asian countries, and Korea, I would say that's true there as well. I can think of one particular Korean dish which is called bibimbap, and so do you know that one? Have you had that before?
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's basically rice with a bunch of different things mixed in on, put on top of the rice, and it's very easy to make that a veggie version. It's not always veggie; they can add meat, but usually if they do, that's just kind of one blob of meat and then lots of different blobs of different kinds of vegetables. So it's very easy to just take off the blob of meat and egg. They can sometimes add egg, but again, they don't have to, and it's something that would be made on the spot. Each bowl would be made individually, so it's really, really easy to veganize. And I actually had a vegan bibimbap on the Camino de Santiago when I was walking on this pilgrimage trail across Spain, which I did last summer. And there are little Koreans walking the Camino. Not very many Chinese, not very many Japanese, but for whatever reason, the Camino is extremely popular among Koreans. And so, you stay in these pilgrim hostels. So it's kind of like a youth hostel. You're staying in a dorm, but it's made specifically for pilgrims who are walking the trail. And in one town, we were walking through, and I saw a sign which was written in Korean and in Spanish and in English, saying that they had, a Korean communal dinner that they would prepare. So obviously they were, targeting the Korean market, which was really smart because I know that the Koreans were suffering with, dealing with Spanish food, which was very different from what they were used to. So I'm sure that lots of Koreans were attracted to that. And then they also had a little thing that said vegan option also available. So that attracted me. So they were doing a really good job of targeting these kinds of, niche markets who were in desperate search for something that they could eat, Koreans and vegans. And so then they just combined the two, and they made a big communal dinner of bibimbap. And so we had this rice dish with all kinds of vegetables. I can't remember what it was, but it was really colorful. I have a photo of it on Instagram somewhere if you go far enough down in my feed. Lots of purples and pinks and greens, and so that's a delicious kind of go-to meal if you're in Korea. And then other Asian countries would have similar things, not that exactly, but lots of a kind of veggie stir fry or tofu. Tofu is very common in most Asian cuisines, and it's not necessarily a meat substitute like we tend to think of it in the West. So you do need to watch out, because just because a dish has tofu in it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't also have meat in it. Yeah. And I have run into that a couple of times. For example, there's a pretty common Chinese dish called mapo tofu, and so it's a tofu on rice, served with rice in a sauce, but there's also some minced meat mixed into the sauce as well, which you wouldn't see very often in the West, because people tend to think of tofu as something that you would eat instead of meat. But there, it's a huge, hugely common staple, a huge part of their diet. But it's not just for vegetarians, and so you might also find it mixed with animal products.
That's a really good suggestion, and that's something I really enjoyed about Veggie Planet. I would definitely recommend Veggie Planet to anybody who is traveling to a non-English speaking country, especially because you have so many suggestions just for those simple things, like kind of how you were mentioning, if you have just even the word for vegan in these different languages, it really helps. Like I really enjoyed it as a guide for things to ask for, especially if you're outside of an English speaking country, things like that. Knowing those little tricks is really helpful, especially just so you're prepared before you go. I think that's so helpful. And it's interesting. I was actually eating at a Korean restaurant the other day here in Calgary that is run by Rose from Cheap Lazy Vegan, which if any of you guys are vegan and you watch YouTube, you're probably familiar with her channel. Cheap Lazy Vegan is a pretty big channel, but she lives here in Calgary, and she just turned her parents' Korean restaurant into a vegan restaurant. So it's still all Korean food, like it's a lot of Korean main dishes. And then she's just veganized them. And it was very easy to do. Like I had japchae, actually my husband did too, with some little dumplings that were absolutely delicious. And it was so tasty. And a lot of those foods, like you say, they might even contain, they might be mostly vegan traditionally, but then they've added, usually there's some beef or something in japchae. Often they'll put a little bit of beef in it. It can be vegan. It may not be vegan. So just being able to ask for no meat and things like that is super helpful in those countries.
Yeah.
Because I would say definitely in Asia, the dairy is less of a worry. You're less likely to run into those things. But just being able to ask for no meat, and even eggs, it's less likely to be part of it as well. But being able to get the meat out is a really helpful thing, I think. And just knowing how to do that is super helpful.
Absolutely.
Well. And of course, the first time you go to a new country, it's even more helpful for seeing the sights and everything to have a little bit of help. And I know one of my friends went to Japan recently, and she's been vegetarian like pretty much her entire life. But she was very concerned about going to Japan because it is a country, as you mentioned, there's some places like France that are a little bit harder. If you don't speak the language, it can be a little harder to make sure that your food is even like for her, she just didn't want to have to eat fish. And she was like, if I go to Japan, it's going to be a nightmare. And she works with a travel agency that specializes in vegans and things like that. So that really helped her. And that's something that you do. I saw that you do vegan tours, and you've been doing this for a while now, yes?
Well, it's a thing, actually, that I'm starting just this year. So it's a collaboration with a vegan travel company called Veg Johnson Journeys, and they're based in the U.S., but they run vegan tours to different places around the world, primarily in Europe and in North America. And so I am going to be the tour guide who's leading the tour for them in Portugal. We're doing one in Portugal, which, as we mentioned at the start of the show, is my adopted home base. So I'm in Lisbon, Portugal right now. This is where I live when I'm not traveling. And so I'm really excited because I have completely fallen in love with the city and with the country in general. And I can't wait to, share it with other people and help them to, experience and discover it the way that I have. And so I'm doing that one in June. That's June 16th to 24th of this year. And then from August 31st to September 10th, I'm going to be leading a tour of Italy, which is another place that is very dear to my heart. And I lived in Rome kind of off and on for a few years. My husband and I actually met in Rome and lived there together. And that's where, we started as a couple. We went back there and got married years later because we wanted to get married in Rome because it was such a special place for us. And so we try to get back there as often as we can. So that tour is going to be really the classic Italian tour. If this is your first time to Italy, then it's the places that you absolutely don't want to miss. So that's Rome and Florence and Venice. And then we're also going to Bologna, which is a beautiful city. But the reason that we're going there in particular is because they have the world's largest vegan festival in Bologna. So we're timing the tour in order to coincide with that. So we're going to be attending that vegan festival in Bologna as well, which is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, because I do find like when you go to a new place, you want to be able to see all of the sites and enjoy all of the sites and not have to worry so much about the food. Because I have to say, like, no matter what you're doing when you're traveling, like for me, I like to be able to just relax and enjoy it. And I find that is really nice when you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat. And I'm sure for anyone, no matter what your dietary concerns might be, if you have any dietary restrictions, it's really nice to just be able to go and enjoy the food, enjoy the travel. It really improves your enjoyment of the whole thing, right? So,
Absolutely. And I know, I mean, I was there like when I was going through my vegan transition. I like to have that fear and anxiety about, oh, but what am I going to do when I'm traveling? How am I going to communicate? How, what are they going to have for me? Especially if you don't speak the language. Whereas I do speak Portuguese and Italian fairly fluently. And so, I will be able to guide you. And I know all of the restaurants really well. And I'm really excited about, like I said, just helping people to experience these places. And because I know that is a concern. Portuguese traditional cuisine, there's absolutely nothing vegan about it. I mean, it's really all about meat and fish and but there is actually quite a strong burgeoning vegan scene here, and so we have some great vegan and vegetarian restaurants, and also just some great more mainstream restaurants that have become vegan friendly. They've started adding vegan options onto their menus because they're seeing the growing demand for that.
I love the vegan speakeasy that you were sharing on your blog the other day. I don't know what you would call that, like a secret restaurant, that doesn't actually, you have to get into it and find out where it is. Those kind of like hidden gems that are harder to know about. Definitely your blog, Nomadic Vegan, is great for that because you do share so many interesting stories of places that are kind of off the beaten path. Reminds me a little bit of Rick Steves. I feel like you're kind of the Rick Steves of veganism. If any of you guys grew up watching Rick Steves and his kind of like Europe through the back door, I feel like that's what you really do on your channel. And I also appreciate it because I have seen other people doing vegan travel that's a little bit higher end. And it's not that yours is not high end. It is. It's really nice. I love that. I was noticing with the travel through Portugal and through Italy as well. You don't have a single supplement. If you're traveling by yourself, you don't have to pay extra for your own room. So that I really like that. But I also like that it's definitely geared towards the middle class traveler instead of someone who just is unlimited budget. And I really like that. It's really important. I feel like, at least for me, I would want to go and be able to do it on a reasonable budget. And I like that you have that. Just kind of like, it reminds me of Rick Steves. Like you're going to really nice places, but you're not going like this super ultra luxury travel, and it's really nice. Like you get to find more interesting places that way. Because I find for myself, you always want to go to a few nice places when you're traveling somewhere new. But it's also nice to see what locals really are eating. Not most. Even wherever you are, nobody's eating 5-star dinners every single night. You have to go and explore the edges and see what there really is and how people really live there. And it's a really nice experience. So I really like that about your blog because they're places that I would actually go.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that because they're the places that I go too. I definitely consider myself to be a budget traveler. If nothing else, just because I travel so much, that I have to really travel on a pretty tight budget because that's my priority. I would much rather travel for longer and be able to spread it out and, stay in budget hotels and eat in lower budget places as opposed to having a luxury trip for 1 week and then that's the only trip I do for the year. That's not where my priority is. So I've always been a budget traveler. I mean, when I started out, I was a backpacker. I mean, I still am a backpacker. I still travel with a backpack. I think it's the most practical way to get around and to carry your stuff with you. But when my husband and I were younger, even before we were married, we were on a very, very tight budget. I think when we were in India, we spent something like $7 per person per day for the 4 months or so that we were traveling around India. So I was in Europe, you can't that kind of budget. It is going to be more expensive than that. But we've done as much as we can to keep the prices down on the tours and to go to, like you said, authentic places. I think that you get a much more authentic experience traveling when you're traveling, on a lower budget, because you do get to mingle with the people more as opposed to, just staying in these luxury places and hanging out with other luxury tourists. And then you don't really experience the place in the same way, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things, like you say, when you're a savvy traveler, when you're someone who travels a lot, the more you learn, the more you want to be able to experience. And if you don't spend all of it in one place, you get to travel more, which is really important. I definitely encourage everyone to check out Wendy's blog, Nomadic Vegan, and take a look at some of the tours that she's having coming up this year. It's really exciting that you're getting into this, Wendy. I just absolutely love it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Do you have any parting suggestions for people about just getting into travel? Any of your, like, what would be your number one suggestion for people?
My number one suggestion is to take a positive attitude with you. That's the most important thing that you can pack. And it really, everything is going to come down to that you bring to it. That's going to determine whether you have a positive experience or a negative experience. You know, I can tell you all day about, oh, you know, the world is so vegan friendly and you're going to find all these vegan options. But if you go in with a scarcity mindset and think, oh, no, I'm not going to find anything, you won't. So I know that might sound a bit woo-woo, but I honestly believe this, that mindset and attitude is absolutely key to enjoying vegan travel and to enjoying life in general. It's key to happiness in general. So yeah, that is probably my big overarching piece of advice. If I could give you one piece of advice, that would be it. But yeah, I do have more kind of detailed, practical tips for vegan travel. So there's an ebook that I've written that you can download absolutely for free. It's called 9 Steps for Easy Vegan Travel. And you'll find that if you go to the homepage of my website. It's thenomadicvegan.com, and you can download it there.
That is awesome. I hope everyone will go ahead and check that out. 9 Steps for Easy Vegan Travel, you said, is a great ebook, and awesome suggestions. I've appreciated that so much. I think I read that one first, even before I read Veggie Planet, and just really good suggestions. And I agree with you completely. The most important thing is just being positive. And you're right. Maybe it does sound a bit woo, but it's so true. If you have a positive outset, a positive vision of everything from the outset, it makes it so much easier to be able to travel or really do anything in life. Thank you so much for joining me today, Wendy, and have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.